hi there everyone, it's Linda here from Just For Tummies, and welcome to this live event this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about urinary tract infections, bacterial vaginosis and thrush, sometimes called candida. And throughout September is Urological Awareness Month. It's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? Urological Awareness Month. And urology is the study of the male and female urinary system, and that includes the kidneys, the ureters, the two pipes that connect the bladder to the kidneys, the bladder, and the urethra. And all throughout this month, Just For Tummies, with all of our, the majority of our social posts and our newsletters have been about urinary tract infections like cystitis, thrush and bacterial vaginosis, to try and highlight and make aware these conditions that affect the lives of millions of women worldwide. And joining me this evening is Sophia Hill, nutritional therapist, and I'm just going to invite Sophia to join us now. And there she is.
Hi.
Sophia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. It's a bit darker outside since our last live though, which is sad.
I know. You know, when I woke up this morning, I looked out of the window. I thought, what's happened overnight?
I know. I thought the same.
It's proper autumn, isn't it?
It is. Sadly, it's gone too quickly this summer, hasn't it?
Sadly, well, it's my favourite time of the year.
Oh, good.
and it's funny, you know, Sophie. I was talking to someone about it recently. You know, in the summer, my energy drops. For some people, their energy rises. Mine drops. But in the autumn, my energy starts to rise. So I don't know if you've got any theories about that. I don't know if it's something to do with the moon and the way the planets are aligned.
Maybe. Although I do think that the sun and the heat can be exhausting for some people, can't it? And it can. Sorry.
I was going to say, look at last week, how hot it was, and the humidity last week. It was just so draining. And today it's completely different.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Well, Sophia, thanks so much for joining me this evening and helping me with this live. And I've just been saying that this month is Urological Awareness Month. It's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it?
It is.
and it's the urology is the study of the urinary system in both males and females. So all through this month, Just For Tummies, our focus has been on, with our social media posts and our emails, it's been on things like urinary tract infections, thrush, bacterial vaginosis, and how to resolve these issues naturally. So I just want to welcome everyone to tonight's live. And ladies, if you have got a UTI, if you're struggling with thrush, bacterial vaginosis, if you keep getting recurring UTIs, thrush and bacterial vaginosis, and if you feel as though you want to share your story, then please do comment in the comments section. And if you want to receive our free UTI, thrush and BV fact sheet, then just ask in comments and we'll send it to you automatically in Messenger. And there's lots of advice and tips in that fact sheet on how to, what causes these conditions and the risk factors of these conditions and how they can be resolved naturally. And so please ask for that fact sheet. So let's get started then. First of all, Sophia, I just want to mention a few statistics. I've been doing a little bit of reading up, and I've been looking at the NICE guidelines actually, and finding out, the up-to-date kind of treatment protocols for UTIs in particular. But we'll come on to those later. But a few statistics, yeah. So the incidence of UTIs is higher in young women. So around 10 to 20% of young women will get a UTI in their lifetime, and 1 in 20 will see their GP with symptoms of cystitis, but only half will actually have a bacterial infection.
Yes.
And this is why testing is so important, isn't it?
Definitely, to avoid unnecessary antibiotics, or even the wrong antibiotic for the bacteria you've got. So definitely test before, if you can, taking them.
I know some women that contact me. They tell me that testing is just not fit for purpose because there are false positives and false negatives, and also, of course, there's the issue of when they do a dip test at the GP surgery. Really, a culture should be sent off to a lab so they know exactly what pathogenic bacteria they're dealing with, so they can then prescribe the correct antibiotic. Because by prescribing broad spectrum antibiotics all the time, these women are just getting recurring UTIs. I don't know if that's your experience.
Definitely. I think once you start on the antibiotic slope, it's very slippery because, as we know, you then wiping out all your good bacteria, which is your defense mechanism. So it leaves you wide open for the next one. And often people relapse within 6 months, if not before, actually, with another UTI, and then more antibiotics, lower levels of lactobacillus, etc. So it is a horrible, vicious cycle to get into, that's for sure. Yes,
that's right. And of course it puts these women at risk of getting irritable bowel syndrome, at risk of getting inflammatory bowel disease, at risk of getting Clostridium difficile, and at risk of getting antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah, all of that. So taking care of all those microbiomes, the vaginal microbiome, the gut microbiome, and the bladder microbiome, all those microbiomes should be kept in tip-top condition if possible, with the use of good bacteria and all the rest of it. So we'll dive into that, I'm sure, in a bit with what to do.
Well, I've just flagged this comment here, and I think we're streaming on Just for Tummies, on the Just for Tummies Facebook page, Sophia, and ladies who are watching, in the Tummy Talk group, and on Just for Tummies YouTube as well. So, we're simultaneously streaming. So this Facebook user here, I think, has come from Tummy Talk. Otherwise, it would say her name. But she's currently struggling with a persistent UTI, my 8th since January. Ongoing now for 3 odd years. I've lost count of the number and types of antibiotics I've been prescribed. Oh dear, that. Please download our request our fact sheet in the comments, Facebook user, sorry, I don't know your name, and we'll send you our fact sheet, and there's lots and lots of information in there. And by all means, if you want to discuss your particular case further, you're welcome to email me or email Sophia. Sophia, do you want to give your email address?
Yeah, of course. So if you do want to ask any questions following this or anything, my email address is hello@sophiahillnutrition.com.
Yes,
so you can get me on there, or if you use Instagram, but email is preferred, please.
Yes, and your Instagram grid is beautiful.
Thank you.
Anyone, I would encourage you to follow Sophia's Instagram account, because the images of in particular, the food, your recipe. There's a lot of food images, Sophia, on your Instagram grid. The delicious recipes that you put together and that you prepare and cook and eat.
Yeah, that's the best bit.
So what's the name of your Instagram account?
That's just Sophia Hill Nutrition. So that's the easy one to find.
Okay, great. I'm just going to check a few comments. So it's mainly people who are requesting the fact sheet. So let's go back to a few more questions. So again, back to statistics. So mainly affects young women. And we probably know why, don't we, Sophia?
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to do with intercourse, isn't it?
Yeah,
because
more sexually active.
Young women tend to be more sexually active, and of course, sexual intercourse does increase the risk of getting a UTI. And I don't know if you want to explain that in a little bit more detail, Sophia.
Yeah, sure. So the bacteria that live in the vagina and the anal area, sort of, just due to the nature of the anatomy of it, can travel and enter through the urethra and then into the bladder, travel up that passage. So that can then cause an infection. So this, translocation, possibly during sex with all the moving around that's happening, and possible bacteria from, your partner, possibly, but more so to do with the translocation of your own bacteria, really.
Yes.
Semen can actually change the pH of your vagina as well, so it becomes more alkaline, and that might worsen symptoms, more to do with something like bacterial vaginosis and other conditions that are associated with lack of acidity, because we do want the pH of the vagina to be acidic. We don't want it to be alkaline. So the sperm directly can affect that. So if you are really struggling with something like BV, it may be worth, until you get on top of the infection, that you use barrier methods just to stop that pH being affected.
And when you say barrier methods, you mean condoms, don't you?
Condoms,
yes, yeah. And of course, in a woman, the urethra, it's quite short, isn't it?
Yes.
So that pathogenic bacteria that's normally E. coli, isn't it, Sophia? It's not got very far to travel up the urethra and get into the bladder and trigger
exactly
an infection. But I just wonder, because lots of women have lots of intercourse, but not all women get UTI. So there's got to be something. There's got to be something else, hasn't there? Maybe it's because they've had antibiotics, and those antibiotics have wiped out a lot of the beneficial protective bacteria in the bladder. Maybe they've got diabetes, which puts them more at risk of certainly UTIs. Maybe they've got a weakened immune system as well, which makes them more predisposed to getting any kind of infection, not just a bladder infection.
Definitely.
Right.
And
so
again, I would just always say, some people might have better gut health than others. And then, like we say, with the crosstalk between these different microbiomes, that's definitely an area to support if someone's got recurrent UTIs. Is the gut health side as well.
Yes. What can women do both before intercourse and after intercourse, Sophia, to help reduce the risk of that E. coli bacteria getting to the bladder? Before and after you've had sex, then that helps to flush out the bacteria, as does obviously drinking plenty before, so that you've actually got urine to pass through, so it helps to flush that area through. So hydration, weeing before and after sex are two very easy to implement things, and as soon as possible after having sex, to go for a wee is better. I know some women, they jump in the shower, don't they?
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessary, really. I mean, yes, if you do, and some women who have contacted me, in fact, one contacted me yesterday. She emailed me because she knew that we were doing this talk this evening, to say that every time she and her husband had sex, she got a UTI. And she's not had sex for several years now, and in that time she's never had a UTI.
Right.
So I suppose it's a case for celibacy as well.
Definitely.
Right. So do you want to say anything else about that, Sophia?
Only that you can help to improve the vaginal microbiome through targeted supplementation. Certain lactobacillus strains can help that. So it's not all doom and gloom if you feel like you are always set up for that. There are things you can do. You don't have to be celibate forever. You can, take different interventions to support that microbiome.
Well, I know. I mean, I developed my For Women probiotic capsules, specifically to help women who struggle with these conditions. And as you know, Sophia, my passion is digestive and gut health, and I developed a range of supplements to help people who have IBS and constipation and bloating. But I'll tell you the story behind my For Women capsules and why I decided to develop them, because you don't know this story, do you?
No, I can't believe I don't know it.
And I thought you did. So what I developed the initial range of Just for Tummies supplements, and I was still working in the clinic. And one day, a lady booked in to come to see me for colon hydrotherapy treatment, because, as you know, I used to carry out a lot of colon hydrotherapy treatments. And this lady came to see me who was suffering with the most severe constipation. And she'd been referred to me by her gastroenterologist at Queen's Hospital in Nottingham, because they just didn't know what to do with her and the constipation. So she and they had tried everything to get her bowels to move to empty, but nothing was working. So, drinking more water, eating more fibre, taking supplements, taking laxatives, even carrying out enemas, it wasn't moving at all. And usually in cases like that, the hospital, they will admit the person and they will do a procedure that's called manual bowel evacuation. And that's where, you go under anaesthetic and they glove up in the operating theatre and they manually pull the feces out. Now, the issue with this particular procedure is there's a high risk of infection. So you have to take antibiotics in case you do get an infection. But with this particular lady, they couldn't carry out this procedure because they couldn't give her any antibiotics. So she may have got a really severe infection that may have been fatal. Right. And the reason that they couldn't give her any antibiotics was because she was antibiotic resistant.
Right.
So no amount of antibiotics would have helped anyway. So they were very, very cautious at the hospital at carrying out manual bowel evacuation. So they sent her to me to carry out colon hydrotherapy treatment. And I did. So first treatment, a very conservative treatment. She was very, very impacted. And I managed to get things going eventually, because the water acts like a solvent. It softens the hard impacted way, so it begins to come away. But I was intrigued as to why she'd become antibiotic resistant. And so I asked her, and you know what I'm going to say, don't you?
Likely, yeah.
So she'd become antibiotic resistant because she'd had years and years of urinary tract infections and years of antibiotics. And she ended up with antimicrobial resistance. And I remember thinking at the time, what? Really? This is so bad. This poor woman has been struggling all these years. She's now antibiotic resistant. That's quite dangerous. Yeah. Because if she got a simple infection, what antibiotic could they use to treat that infection? And I think as well that the antibiotics had increased the risk of her getting constipated. Because we know that a lack of bifidobacteria in the large bowel affects transit time, as do the lactose strains as well. So and I remember I was carrying out the colonic treatment on it, and I just went bright red because I was so angry that this woman had been put in this predicament. Yeah, and I knew that she wasn't the only one. That there are tens of thousands of women all over the world in exactly the same predicament, because they don't know that there are other protocols, natural protocols that you and I can offer, Sophia, that can effectively reduce UTIs and prevent UTIs. So that's why I developed my For Women capsules. I did my research. I looked at all the strains, that helped to reduce UTIs, and that's why I put the lacto-rutterine. But I also put lacto-acidophilus and lacto-rhamnosus in to support the immune system.
Yeah.
Because you need a good, strong, resilient immune system so it can fight any potential bladder infection. Definitely. And also, of course, I put those in to support digestive and gut health as well. So that's the story between about the For Women capsules. So we decided to invest more time and more money into developing that particular supplement, and that's on offer at the moment. It's 10% off until the end of this month, and people can go onto the Just for Tummies website and read the amazing reviews that we get on the For Women capsules and purchase them. So carrying on.
That's a great story.
Yes. Oh, I was just honestly, Sophia, I was just so angry. The injustice of it all, and I thought women are getting such a raw deal. Women who suffer with UTIs, thrush and BV, and of course the For Women capsules also help with thrush and BV, and you put together that wonderful probiotic pessary recipe.
Yes.
So women can take an oral probiotic capsule, and they can also use the powder from one of the For Women capsules, make their own probiotic pessaries, cheap as chips, aren't they, Sophia?
Yeah.
Stick them in a glass jar in the fridge, and they'll keep for about 6 months, and then they can treat it kind of more locally by inserting one of an evening, before they go to bed. Right. So there's around 250,000 hospital admissions for UTIs, but these are mainly older ladies, kind of 65 plus, and the mean average of admission is 8 to 9 days. Gosh. For these ladies, and I'm sure many of them they've kind of ended up with these awful recurring UTIs because they've probably had course after course of antibiotics anyway. And bacterial vaginosis is the most common vaginal infection in reproductive age women, with estimates running as high as 70%. I don't know if that's your experience, not personally, Sophie, but with your clients.
I see it quite a lot, that's for sure, and quite a lot alongside people who've got IBS as well, and that's what also kind of strengthens that hypothesis that we've got that translocation of bacteria from the gut into the vagina, and so on. So yeah, I definitely do see BV quite frequently.
So that hypothesis then between like IBS and BV, what is it exactly? And when you talk about the bacterial translocation, do you mean that bacteria in the bowel is, as in leaky gut, is translocating through the bowel wall and getting into the bladder that way?
Yeah, but also again through sort of the route of when we go to the loo, feces can contaminate, going to the toilet, not wiping properly. That kind of contamination is also quite a common source of that bacterial translocation as well.
Okay. And I've just put up on here, look, that recurrent BV is associated with miscarriage and premature births.
Yeah.
And vulval vaginal candida, which is a fungal infection, affects around 3/4 of women during their reproductive years as well. So we've got UTIs, haven't we, Sophia? We've got bacterial vaginosis, which is a bacterial infection of the vagina.
Yeah.
And then we've got candida. Thrush.
Yeah.
And that's more a fungal infection, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the more candida type infection.
Yes. So we know that a UTI can affect, you can get obviously cystitis, which is a bladder infection. You can get U3, I don't know how to pronounce this. You can get an infection in the ureters.
Yes.
And you can get urethritis, and you can get an infection in the urethra.
Yes.
And you can get a kidney infection. So if there's an infection in particular in the bladder, and that's not managed very well, it can track up the ureters to the kidneys, can't it? And that can be quite serious.
Yeah, it can, because it can even lead to sepsis as well, which is obviously very, very dangerous. So even though they're very common, these UTIs, they do need to be taken very seriously. While everyone might say, oh yeah, I've got another UTI, you know, if it isn't going away, it does need to be looked into.
Yes, I mean, I often get women contact me and they say, I think I've got a UTI, I've got these symptoms. And I say, well, don't think, go and see your GP and get tested properly. Because the last thing you want is a UTI that gets out of control and then you end up with sepsis.
Definitely.
So let's have a look at some of the risk factors. So we know, we've talked about antibiotics, haven't we? We know that it's a bit of a conundrum that if a woman gets a UTI, she's put on antibiotics, but that puts her at more risk of getting another UTI. Yes, because the antibiotics just wipe out the beneficial bacteria in the bladder, and that makes it more, that puts it more, wipes out the beneficial bacteria. But interestingly enough, the pathogenic bacteria can be more resistant to antibiotics than the commensal beneficial bacteria. So that tends to cling on to the lining of the bladder wall, doesn't it? Just ready and waiting to trigger another infection. And then there's diabetes, isn't there, Sophia? And is that because diabetes is an autoimmune disease?
Well, I suppose it depends which type of diabetes you have, because type 1 is obviously autoimmune, which will cause dysregulation in your immune system, which can leave you more prone to all sorts of infections. But even if it's the type 2 diabetes, which is not autoimmune, then you can still be at more at risk of UTIs, because the nerve damage and the impact on the blood flow because of high blood sugar and, you know, eroding the nerve cells and etc. in diabetes can implicate in UTIs, and also that can also affect your immune system as well, having either type of diabetes.
Yes, and we know that type 2 diabetes is very treatable, isn't it, through dietary and lifestyle changes.
Definitely, whereas type 2,
whereas type 1 isn't. Type 1 isn't. So we've touched on sexual intercourse, we've touched on poor personal hygiene. Constipation, of course, is an increased risk of getting a UTI if a woman suffers with constipation, because if the stool in the bowel is building up in there, it's expanding, it's putting pressure on the bladder, that may prevent the bladder from emptying properly. And we know that retained urine, as there's, you know, bacteria will begin to multiply in retained urine, and that could trigger a UTI. And also there's this issue again with bacterial translocation, especially a very, very constipated bowel, where toxins, endotoxins from those retained stools may leak through the bowel wall and get into the bladder. And
definitely.
I read lots about bacterial translocation, and I don't know if there's actually been any studies, you know, done on bacterial translocation, but to me it makes perfect sense, because the bowel's very close to the bladder. You know, if the bowel tissues are touching the bladder tissues, surely there can be cross contamination.
I think I've got some research papers on that. I'll have to dig them out, but if I find them, I'll send them over to you, because the labs who do the testing have got so much research on all of that kind of stuff. So, I'll have a look.
If you come across it, I'd be really interested in reading that. And so menopause, then, if you can briefly touch on why menopause increases a woman's risk of getting a UTI, Sophia.
So unfortunately, the declining estrogen can really deplete our levels of lactobacillus in menopause women. So whenever I run one of these female ecologics tests, if the woman is, you know, postmenopausal, then I often expect to see lower levels of lactobacillus on the test. The different strains of them. And the lactobacillus is what helps to create that acidic environment in the vagina, helps control E. coli infections. So that in itself can leave you more open to an E. coli infection, and then hence a UTI. But also the lack of estrogen can promote the vaginal atrophy, which makes it more prone to adhesions or tearing and pain, and just more susceptible in general to BV and thrush and UTIs as well. So yeah, there's a few things there, but mainly down to estrogen from the lack of the estrogen really in postmenopausal women. So whatever you can do to support your estrogen levels, like you can get phytoestrogenic foods from things like flax seeds and soya and those kind of things that will help to give you a boost of estrogen from plant-based sources. So might be something to look into if you are feeling the effects of having lower estrogen.
Oh, and what about lubricants as well for the vagina? I often recommend the Wild one, Sophia, WYLDE.
Oh yeah.
Have you come across it? It doesn't contain any nasties whatsoever.
Yes, I always like to look for maybe a water-based one, or something that definitely doesn't have parabens or any nasty, chemicals that are going to disrupt the pH in your vagina.
Just touching on thrush for a moment, I let everyone. I sent an email, to my database, and we posted it on social about this live that we're doing tonight. And a couple of women contacted me who suffer with lichen sclerosis, and they said that women are often being diagnosed with thrush when in actual fact they've got lichen sclerosis.
Right.
And lichen sclerosis needs to be properly treated, properly managed, because it can, in rare cases, develop into vulval cancer. And I didn't know this. This was an eye-opener for me. So what I'm doing on the 30th of September at 7 o'clock, I'm going to be doing another live with Claire. Claire runs the Lichen Sclerosis and Vulval Cancer UK Facebook group. And she's suffered with lichen sclerosis herself and vulval cancer, and she's a font of knowledge on those two subjects and anything to do with vaginas actually. So that's on what date is that? The 30th. It's just, I think it's a Thursday the 30th of September at 7 o'clock on this channel.
Great, I will definitely tune in.
Right, so that's where were we? Oh yeah, pregnancy, of course, and that's because of the change in hormones again, I suppose, Sophia.
Yes, exactly. Change in hormones, they will be all over the place, and that can really affect, as we just said, all sorts of different things like bacteria and pH in your vagina. And
then what concerns me about that is if a woman gets a UTI, she's put on antibiotics, she's pregnant, and those antibiotics will get through the placenta and be passed on to that developing baby.
Yeah.
And affect that baby's developing gut microbiome.
I know, that is really concerning. So going into pregnancy in the best possible, I know it's not always possible to plan, but if you are planning to get pregnant, then going into your pregnancy with the best possible microbiome, not just vaginal, but gut microbiome. So, I have people working on that for a few months before conception, just to make sure that their baby gets the best chance and their guts don't need any, antibiotics during pregnancy.
And especially if the woman wants to have a vaginal birth, that baby is pushing down that birth canal.
Yeah.
And the last thing that baby wants to be picking up, swallowing and coating its skin, are pathogenic strains of bacteria and yeast. It wants plenty of lactobacilli bacteria.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
So yes, I've put here nutty pelvic floor muscles. So pelvic floor muscles that are probably in spasm. That's going to put pressure on nerves that supply the bladder. The bladder doesn't empty properly, so retained urine again, high risk of colonization of the E. coli bacteria, and of course diet and lifestyle. So I think you're the expert there, Sophie. Do you want to say a few things about that? I mean, it's in the UTI fact sheet anyway, all about diet and lifestyle to, you know, acid diet, alkaline diet. But if you just want to touch on that, Sophia.
Yeah, so there's obviously the common offending foods and drinks. So caffeine and alcohol are definitely ones to avoid. They can be irritating and inflammatory and not conducive for healthy microbiomes, you know, gut or vaginal microbiomes. Alcohol can often really spark off a bout of cystitis in women, I find. So trying to abstain from alcohol, especially if you are, you know, recovering from one or you've got an active infection, I would definitely recommend to avoid that. Sugar definitely will feed the bacteria, will you know, worsen an infection or prevent it from healing as quickly as it could do. But artificial sweeteners aren't much better either for your microbiome. So don't go and replace your sugar with sweeteners, because that's just as bad. So try and use something that's lower GI, lower glycemic index, so less spike in the blood sugar. So something like possibly some raw honey, because at least the honey is going to have some antibacterial properties to it, rather than white processed sugar, which won't. But definitely be mindful of the sweeteners there. And then I love to put in some fermented foods. So they can be really great for adding in some lactobacillus strains from the fermented foods, like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, kefir, those kind of foods that have gone through that fermentation process. They can help to support the good bacterial levels in your gut. And plenty of fibre as well. So fibre helps to get rid of and to bind to any bacteria and toxins and things. So keeping your fibre intake up, so 30 grams minimum really a day, if possible.
What does that look like, Sophia? 30 grams of fibre a day. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, well, if you think about something like, let's see what's common fibre-y food, oats, for example, a portion of oats will have around sort of 6 to 7 grams of fibre in that. Half an avocado has actually got about 7 grams in it. So if you have a bowl of porridge and half an avocado, then you are, you know, quite way into that fibre. Then you obviously got all your vegetables and fruits, nuts and seeds, beans and pulses and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite easy, but you do have to kind of make a conscious effort to make sure you're getting it in, I think.
Yes,
definitely. And the variety as well. So in order to give those good bacteria the food they need, so like the fertilizer to the probiotics, we need the prebiotics, and the prebiotics come from those fibres. So prebiotic foods are often quite high in FODMAPs, which tend to be foods that unfortunately the people who are suffering with these conditions are scared of. So it can be a bit of another vicious circle, because they avoid the FODMAP foods, so they starve away the good bifidobacteria and lactobacillus strains. So, you know, that's something else to consider, that you do need those prebiotic fibres to keep your good bacteria, you know, colonizing within the gut, rather than just being transient. So
yes, like you say, it can be a vicious circle. I mean, I've got a few other things down here. Garlic is one of the most potent natural antibiotics. Sweet potatoes, coconut oil,
fabulous. Antibacterial, antifungal, anti-everything. So I always like to use that. And again, you can use that intravaginally as well, like with the pessaries. So cooking in it is great, but you can also use it inside your vagina as well.
Well, of course, our probiotic pessary recipe, Sophia, it's coconut oil, cacao butter, and the powder from one of the For Women capsules. Also, they can put essential oils in and rose water if they want to, but if they just want to strip it back and keep it simple, it's just those 3 ingredients.
Yes, that's it. And I would just say stress and also smoking are really important. So Stress and bacterial vaginosis are best friends. So cortisol will feed that infection. So managing your stress levels is so important, even for UTIs and BV. And then anyone who's smoking, if you are and you're getting these UTIs and things, then that's definitely something to consider trying to stop, because the smoking can secrete nicotine into the vagina, which can really negatively impact the microbiome there. So
yes,
that's another one.
Well, I say to women when they contact me and they've got a UTI, oh, what do I need to do? And I say, well, first of all, you need to get some of my For Women capsules. But the bladder needs to empty, doesn't it? The bladder needs to empty to flush out that that bacteria. So that means drinking plenty of water, doesn't it?
Definitely.
And Andrea, thank you for your question. I can remember in the 80s, I used to take a lot of anodine and it gave me really bad thrush. Now, I know anodine can also cause intestinal bleeding if you take a lot of it, can't it? But I don't know about the thrush connection, really. But anyway, thanks very much for that, Andrea. And we've covered, obviously somebody from Tummy Talk, knotty pelvic floor muscles. Yes, if your pelvic floor muscles are stressed and stretched, and if they've got trigger points if they're in spasm, that's going to put pressure on your bladder and prevent the bladder from emptying properly, as I said earlier, and that increases the risk of that E. coli bacteria multiplying and causing an infection. And one lady here, Deborah, thank you for this. Often get UTI infections, no bowel, have a colostomy bag. Well, it's not just it's not just E. coli from the bowel. That there's lots of other factors involved in getting a UTI, not just infection from bowel material, as we've touched on. Right, let's have a look. Yes, so we've covered why do antibiotics increase the risk of getting a UTI when they are prescribed to treat UTIs. So yeah, many women are on a merry-go-round of getting a UTI, being prescribed a course of antibiotics, another UTI, another course of antibiotics equals antibiotic resistance. And I think primary care is failing a lot of women in this respect. Right. So yes, at the first signs of a UTI, what to do? Well, as I said earlier, do what the bladder is best at doing, empty it regularly by drinking more water, at least double of what you would normally drink in a day. And I don't know what you think to this as well, Sophia, but increase your antioxidants by taking things like omega-3s and vitamin E supplements to support your immune system.
Definitely. And probably something that is anti-inflammatory. So there can be quite a lot of inflammation going on if you've got a UTI. And the test that I run, that female ecologics, that does look at some of the inflammatory cytokines that can be found in the vagina. If they're elevated, then I would definitely be looking at inflammatory support as well, especially on the onset. So if you can nip it in the bud,
exactly, yes,
it would be the best course of action to get on top of that.
So tell us a little bit about this vaginal ecology test that's available.
Yeah, so it's called the Female Ecologics, and it is available. You can order it. You have to order it through a practitioner, so you could order it through me or another practitioner. It is 100 of, I think it's actually recently gone up. It was 179. I'm going to check on the prices because I know they said they were putting their prices up, but it's around that mark, around £179. So it's a very easy at-home test that you just do a swab inside the vagina, really easy, pop it back in the tube and post it back off. They will then analyse that swab and then they will report back with a detailed sort of list of all the markers that they test for. So they're looking at the pH. So earlier I think we said about we want the vagina to be acidic. So anyone who's got an alkaline pH, then the focus will be to make sure that this environment is more acidic. So more lactobacillus strains to help with that acidity. And then we can look at other interventions as well that are more short term, like the use of hydrogen peroxide, green tea that we can use as a douche.
Can I just come in there? When you say hydrogen peroxide, do you mean use it vaginally as like a douche?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Because I've got hydrogen peroxide that I use with a mesh nebulizer to keep viruses and bacteria at bay. But I didn't realise that you could use hydrogen peroxide vaginally.
Yes.
So is that the 3% one then?
Yeah, or you can start on the lower percent. I think it's maybe 1.5%. If you want to start on a sort of slower dose and go higher if you tolerate it well. But yeah, that used intravaginally is really effective at increasing that acidity. There's some good research on that actually.
That's fascinating. I didn't realise that.
Yeah, and green tea intravaginally as well can be really good to improve that acidity. The test also looks at the inflammation levels, like I said. So if that's a route we need to go down to support inflammation, then we know that. And then the test also, let me just see if I can get a copy of it up anywhere so I can tell you. There's 4 different strains of lactobacillus that they look at. So lactobacillus crispatus, grasseri, innes, and jenseni. So they are all needing to be in their correct ratios. So particularly the L lactobacillus crispatus, that one we want to see good robust levels of that because it's the best at making its own source of hydrogen peroxide. And it also produces lactic acid, which is good for the vaginal environment as well, because that's an acidic.
So if a woman approached you who was suffering with UTIs and she wanted to get pregnant, this is a test that you would definitely recommend then?
Yes, because we'll be able to see, certain strains on there, for example. So not only does it look at the lactobacillus, but it also looks at a whole list of pathogens. So, for example, it's got a pathogen on there, Gardnerella, which is a causative agent directly for causing UTIs. And also it increases the risk of BV. It's not 100% a causative agent like the Gardnerella is, but there are a couple of other ones on there that increase the risk of infertility. So one of those is megasphere. There's 2 different ones of that. They can increase the risk of pregnancy complications and infertility, and so can E. coli. So they're all things that I would definitely want to look at if someone was struggling to conceive or having problems in that area.
That's fascinating. So ladies, if anyone is interested in that, just say it again, Sophia.
It's the female ecologics test.
Yes, yeah. Then please contact Sophia. So another question. This is one that was emailed to me actually. I never had a UTI until I started going through the menopause. Why is this? Well, we've touched on that. It's the change it's a change in the hormones. And then another one that came through, again, we've covered this. I get a UTI every time I have intercourse with my partner, and this is causing problems in our relationship. What can I do to prevent a UTI? So we've covered that, and there's lots of information in the UTI fact sheet. So request to download, request that, and we will send it. We'll send you the download in Messenger. And what's this one? Yes. I didn't realise that the antibiotics I've had over the years for my UTIs may have caused my IBS, not by IBS, my IBS. What can I do to help both my digestive system and my bladder? Well, yes, so broad spectrum antibiotics, as we said at the beginning, Sophia, just to decimate the levels of beneficial bacteria in and on the whole body. The skin, the bladder, of course, the ureters, the urethra. Bacteria is everywhere, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
A bacteria coats every single organ in our body, including our lungs. There's lots of research being done about the lung having its own microbiome and how important that lung microbiome is for healthy lung tissue. And of course, nowhere more so do antibiotics decimate bacteria than in the digestive system, in the gut in particular. And when we have to remember that the bacteria that's in the gut does so many things. It helps to digest our food, helps to absorb more nutrients, helps to manufacture vitamins, hormones, helps to crowd out pathogenic bacteria, decreases our risk of getting nasty gut infections. Then if much of that bacteria is wiped out, then there's little wonder that people get symptoms like painful bloating, irregular bowel movements, smelly wind, acid reflux, of course, as well. I mean, the number of times I've been contacted by people who have developed acid reflux because they've taken antibiotics. And as soon as this begin to take, a probiotic, they begin to recolonize, a lot of the symptoms improve dramatically.
Definitely. And, if you have had so many courses of antibiotics, and you've then got an IBS diagnosis, or you've had food poisoning as well, it might be worth considering the SIBO element, because not that this is about SIBO, but just because of the antibiotics, that really increases the risk for IBS. And it's estimated that up to 70% of cases of IBS are actually SIBO. So if you can get rid of that SIBO bacteria, then you can get rid of your IBS, and you don't have to live in misery all your life.
No, exactly. Like this lady here, Debbie. Hi, Debbie. Thank you for commenting. IBS since I was a teenager. I'm 61 now. So Debbie, I just wonder, what was the trigger for your IBS when you was a teenager? And what happened? Did you have UTIs as a teenager? Did you have acne as a teenager? So you were put on strong antibiotics to help resolve the acne, but the antibiotics just wiped out the beneficial bacteria in your gut and then predispose you to developing IBS. I'd love to know, Debbie.
Or tonsillitis and ear infections. They are absolute, pests, because they do require, they keep having antibiotics, and then lo and behold, a few years later, we've got IBS, and then we can trace it back to antibiotics as a child.
Yes, and that's what I used to do with clients that came to see me in clinic. I'd take a health question and we'd track back, and I'd try and put the pieces of the puzzle together. Why has this person developed this disorder, this syndrome, this disease? And I do the same now with Just for Tummies. If someone contacts me and they need help, I say, well, why have you developed IBS? How long have you had it? Like at 16, well, a teenager, I'm assuming around 16. What happened then, or what happened a year or two before you began getting the symptoms of IBS? What? Because I say no one's born with IBS, but actually they can be, can't they, Sophia? And maybe we can do a live about that sometime. But I don't know if you want to say anything else, Sophia, because I'm going to start winding this up for this evening now.
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of the points. No, I don't think. I think we've covered everything, unless anyone had any other questions we haven't answered. But I think we've answered most of them.
I would just say to women, if you get a UTI, then yes, if you got a UTI, you absolutely need to take antibiotics, because you don't want to run the risk of the infection getting worse. But when you've taken the antibiotics, just think about a different solution, a different way. Read our UTI fact sheet. There's lots of information in there, and contact either me or Sophia. Sophia's given you her email address. Mine's linda@justfortummies.co.uk, and we'll help you put together a more natural protocol for resolving your UTIs, your thrush, and your bacterial vaginosis. So you're not on this merry-go-round of antibiotics, antifungals that are just treating the symptoms and not getting to the root cause of your problems. And until you get to the root cause, you're going to have constant infections that can be so debilitating, sapping your energy, and just making your life a misery when it's not necessary.
That's it. You really don't have to continue on that sort of merry-go-round of infections and antibiotics. If you can just hop off, we can definitely support you and get you on the right track with the support of, you know, probiotics, diet, stress management, you know, maybe some natural antimicrobials at some point, but definitely building the good levels of bacteria up first.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you everyone for watching and participating. Thank you so much, Sophia, again.
Thank you for having me. It's been
for being
great.
here. And just a reminder, everyone, then, if you want the UTI fact sheet, just request it and we'll send it to you in Messenger. And our For Women capsules are on offer, 10% off until the end of this month. And don't forget, on the 30th of September at 7 o'clock, I'm going live here with Claire from the Lichen Sclerosis and Vulval Cancer Facebook group, talking about those two issues as well. Right. So thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yes,
Bye-bye,
thank
Sophia.
you everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.